Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to talk about how traditionally prophetic insights have been viewed as mystical or divine, but in light of cutting-edge ideas in neuroscience and physics that are all linked in the channel bio, we can better connect the dots between religion and science. One key concept that we're going to explore today is that our consciousness is like a tuning device or a receiver, kind of like a radio picking up signals. In other words, the brain doesn't produce the mind and awareness all on its own. Rather, it receives and filters information from a larger field of consciousness. While this model sounds like New Age speculative garbage, scientists are also turning towards these non-traditional views of consciousness to better explain the process. For example, a transmissive theory of brain function, implications for health, disease, and consciousness, is a recent review of brain function theories that argues the brain does not directly produce consciousness, but instead functions as a filter, channel, or amplifier of pre-existing consciousness phenomena that reside outside and all around us. Rather than a generator of consciousness from scratch, our minds tune into a broader field, similar to how radio turns into omnipresent electromagnetic waves. So we're going to use this idea to guide us as we examine how scientific concepts might illuminate age-old mystical experiences and explore how a person might receive insights or information beyond the ordinary, a modern interpretation of what ancient traditions might have called prophecy. And so this means considering the possibility that consciousness, and thus inspiration or insight, can tap into information-rich field that permeates the universe. It's a pretty big leap from the conventional materialist view, but a variety of scientists and theorists are entertaining the possibility. Again, all of the sources are linked in the channel bio. If consciousness is like a signal, then the brain is like a receiver, then the phenomena that was once mystical, intuition, foresight, even profound insight or prophecy, could have a specific scientific explanation in terms of signal reception and interpretation. So let's have this discussion, grounded in a real scientific dialogue, to expand the conversation, to reframe the prophets' mystical woo status as individuals exceptionally attuned to the subtle quantum signals of a broader reality. So what if prophets and seers, those figures in history or spirituality reputed to have extraordinary knowledge, were essentially exceptional pattern recognizers and interpreters of information? Rather than receiving private messages from a deity in the clouds, were they accessing a kind of deep informational network surrounding us? In modern terms, we can think of this like accessing a cosmic database or cloud storage of knowledge. All of the users of this database can access all of the knowledge in the database, as long as they have the right password, or are on the right database, or in the right channel. See? Mystics in the New Age movement have long referred to something similar, the Akashic Records, a concept of a universal library of all information, which, intriguingly, some contemporary scientists have drawn parallels between this mystical woo idea and physics. For instance, systems theorist Ervin Laszlo proposes that the universe's quantum vacuum, the foundation of space-time, encodes a vast information field, effectively a scientific analog of the Akashic Records. Laszlo equates the quantum vacuum field with the Akashic field of ancient tradition, a field from which all that was ever was, or is, or will be, can be accessed. Extending that hypothesis, prophets could be those rare people who, whether by genetic predisposition, intense training, or altered states of consciousness, manage to query that field for patterns. They discern connections and future trends not by woo magic, but by subconsciously detecting information patterns in this universal field. Consider how in everyday life, some individuals have an uncanny knack for spotting patterns or making accurate predictions. Think of a skilled stock market analyst or a weather-wise farmer. So now let's continue that idea. A prophet might be somebody with an extraordinary sensitivity to patterns that exist in a fundamental level of reality. If all events and knowledge leave even an atomic-sized imprint in an information field, a prophet's mind might entangle with or retrieve that data. And later we'll discuss how that would actually be received, because I'm not talking about getting a clear message or hearing voices. I'm not saying that a prophet can download an information packet with all of this information from the quantum realm. That's not what I'm saying. It's as if their consciousness has a type of internet connection to the universe's cloud server, but because we're running a limited, warm, wet OS, the data is messy and out of order, limited, glitchy, etc. So prophetic knowledge could be recast as this insightful understanding or ordering of quantum information all around us. And rather than being a 1 in a billion fluke, this ability might lie on a spectrum, meaning humans in general have a capacity to tap into broader information networks, even if only a few achieve it strongly. And we will return later to the idea of universality, because it does tie into human evolution. But for now, the key shift is the prophets and divine favoritism is heightened perception and pattern recognition. It's just a skillful tuning into reality's deeper layers are saying, or a greater godly wisdom, as we see with King Solomon. But how could a person physically tune into this broader field of information? So let's look at the idea of the human body as the antenna. In radio technology, an antenna is a physical structure that resonantly picks up signals from the environment. Some scientists and thinkers suggest that our biological structures could do something analogous for consciousness signals, and three intriguing candidates often come up for these structures. Of course, the pineal gland, the vagus nerve, and the network of neurons in the gut, also called the second brain. The pineal gland, deep in the center of the brain, is a tiny pine cone-shaped organ historically associated with mystical insight, hence the name like third eye or seat of the soul. Conspiracy theorists also speculate that this is why there's a statue of a pine cone outside the Vatican. Is because that represents the pineal gland, and there's secret hidden knowledge there. Modern science knows the pineal gland primarily for producing melatonin to regulate sleep, but it has some very curious features. Notably, scientists discovered that the human pineal gland contains tiny calcite microcrystals. These crystals are less than 20 micrometers in size and have a crystalline structure similar to biological minerals in the inner ear. Why is this exciting? Because such crystals can be piezoelectric, meaning that they can generate an electric charge in response to mechanical stress or vibration. In fact, an analysis of the pineal tissue showed that these calcite crystals have likely a twined asymmetrical structure that may permit the existence of a piezoelectric effect. And these crystals are the backbone of a lot of radios and electronic receivers. They can convert electromagnetic signals to electrical signals. So this isn't something crazy that I'm talking about. These are real, actual types of crystals that we really actually use in radio technology. And so, in essence, this means that the pineal crystals might let the pineal gland act like a teeny tiny micro radio receiver in the brain. And when vibrated by sound, movement, or even an external electromagnetic field, like how we get nauseous when there's a massive solar storm, they could produce electrical signals that influence brain activity. There is one study in the source from Buckonier that noted that crystals could interact non-thermally with external electromagnetic fields. And so this raises the tantalizing idea that the pineal gland might be sensing those environmental signals, geomagnetic activity, electromagnetic resonance, and so on, outside of our usual perceptions, giving a scientific twist to why many spiritual traditions posited the pineal gland as an organ of inner vision. If the pineal gland is an antenna, then perhaps in meditative or dream states, it receives that information, potentially contributing to vivid intuitions or even foresight. And if you're like me, you have at least once in your life had a gut instinct about something, and that proved true. Maybe you've even had a deja vu that then came true. Science is showing that our gut feelings are more than a metaphor. They're rooted in our physiology. The vagus nerve is a massive nerve conduit running from the brain stem to the neck, into the chest and abdomen, connecting the brain to the heart, the lungs, and the digestive tract. It's information superhighway of the gut-brain axis. And amazingly, about 80 to 90% of the fibers in the vagus nerve are afferent, meaning that they carry sensory information from the body's organs up to the brain. So our brain is constantly fed info from the gut and other organs via this vagus nerve. Emotions and intuitions often manifest physically in the gut. We get butterflies when we're anxious, for instance. And the vagus is the messenger that sends those signals up here. In fact, visceral feelings and gut instincts are literally emotional intuitions transferred up to your brain via the vagus nerve. As one neuroscience explainer from Psychology Today puts it, this means that your body is picking up on patterns, even subtle changes in your environment or interpersonal dynamics, and informing your conscious mind through sensation. The gut has its own mini nervous system, the enteric nervous system, and can respond to stimuli independently. So that's one of the reasons why it's called the second brain. So while the vagus nerve's known role is in things like fear conditioning, relaxation response, and mood regulation, one can certainly imagine it as a part of the body's antenna system. It's attuned to internal signals like hormone levels, gut microbes, and heart rhythm, which can reflect external circumstances. Some speculative research even asks if our instincts could include picking up on subtler environmental clues that we haven't consciously noticed. At the very least, tuning into one's breath, heartbeat, gut clearly can alter consciousness. Think of meditation or deep breathing exercises. The body might be both the receiver and interpreter of information that doesn't always rise to conscious awareness. So prophets or intuitive individuals throughout history often emphasize bodily stillness, special diets, perhaps unknowingly optimizing their own antenna, their nervous system, to receive insights. And building on this vagus nerve discussion, it's worth noting how robust the gut's neural network is. There are hundreds of millions of neurons in the digestive tract. This enteric brain can act independently, even producing neurotransmitters like serotonin in large quantities. So it's not far-fetched to say that your gut knows, in some cases. For example, many people report feeling inexplicable dread or excitement in their stomach about events before their rational brain even catches up. Some scientists have posited that subtle electromagnetic fields or changes around us might be detected by the body, triggering that gut reaction. Then, of course, the vagus nerve conveys that to the brain, creating a conscious intuition. So while the research is still ongoing, the key point for our discussion is that the body is deeply integrated into perception and awareness. If there is a broad quantum information field around us, our sensory organs, as well as less obvious organs like the pineal gland or even the heart, which also has an electromagnetic field, could also be picking up signals. Our heart flutters when we see someone we love. A prophetic figure, therefore, might have a particularly sensitive antenna system, maybe a pineal gland, highly responsive to frequencies, a vagus nerve finely tuned to the gut and heart changes, and an ability to stay attuned to these bodily messages instead of dismissing them. The idea that the body can sense beyond the five senses has growing empirical support as well. There is a plethora of evidence that the heart and gut send signals that influence decision-making and emotional awareness, even before the conscious brain knows why. So in sum, treating the body as an antenna suggests that perception is a whole-body affair, reaching into the quantum level, eventually giving rise to those inexplicable knowings that prophets are famous for. And now, we venture into a subject abstract in its theoretical scope, yet stimulating for research: quantum consciousness. Quantum physics has taught that particles can be mysteriously connected across vast distances, a phenomenon known as entanglement. If consciousness has any quantum components, a controversial but thought-provoking hypothesis, then entanglement might allow information exchange in ways that classical physics forbids. So let's break this down in simpler terms. Entanglement means that two particles or systems share a state. If you affect one, the other seems to know instantaneously, even if separated by infinite space. Some researchers and philosophers have extended this to minds. Could two conscious minds become entangled? Or could a mind entangle with events in the environment? If so, it could create that channel for information to transfer that we can't detect with our normal five senses. And experiments in parapsychology and consciousness studies have hinted at odd correlations. For example, studies have reported instances where a person's brainwave responds when a distant loved one is stimulated, and if there's an unseen connection. Theoretical implications indicate that conscious entanglement allows minds to connect into greater networks under specific conditions, offering physically informed analog to the collective unconscious. It might also mean that the mind can obtain information from the future or distant places if those are entangled with the present mind. Now, this sounds like science fiction, yet it's the kind of question that is being seriously proposed at the edges of neuroscience and quantum theory. Even Roger Penrose, more on him soon, speculated about quantum effects in the brain, providing non-computational insights, essentially jumps of understanding that aren't explainable by standard neural processing. One particularly fascinating idea is that dreams might reflect quantum-level information exchange. I told you we were going to get back to this. During dreaming, especially in REM sleep, our brains are in a highly unusual state. Sensory input is minimized, internal neural activity is high, and the mind essentially is freewheeling through imagery and memory. In this state, the brain could be more receptive to subtler signals or entangled information that we screen out during waking life. In an article exploring precognitive dreams, a psychologist suggests that during REM sleep, the brain, unbridled by external input, might pick up on signals that we don't consciously register, possibly including signals tied to future events. If those signals come via quantum information channel, for example through entanglement, the dreams could incorporate fragments of future knowledge or remote information. And this is offered as one explanation for credible anecdotes of precognitive dreams. To quote directly, perhaps during the brain's unbridled state in REM, it can identify and process some kind of signals that we don't consciously acknowledge. These signals help inform our understanding of the future. As for where these signals come from, the answer might lie in quantum entanglement, linking points in time or space. Similarly, the dreaming mind might be tuning into a deeper quantum reality in which information spanning the past, present, and future is interwoven, a bit like accessing a time-insensitive database. So this notion of quantum abstraction, see the episode on quantum dreams, suggests conscious experience, particularly in altered states as dreams or meditation, extends beyond the limits of immediate time and place. It abstracts away from the immediate sensory world and might tap the probabilistic non-local realm described in quantum mechanics. Some quantum physicists have even speculated about consciousness existing in a quantum state that isn't strictly bound by linear time. Theories connecting consciousness with quantum phenomena offer suggestions that, if correct, a person's mind may at times precede conventional causality, retrieving abstract information like symbols, intuition, or gut feelings that become coherent only after events unfold. This could give a scientific angle to prophetic experiences, not as literal time travel or crystal ball glazing, but as the subconscious resonating with patterns that are forming at the quantum level before they manifest in the classical world. It's certainly a heady concept, and while lacking full confirmation, obviously, the scientific movement does support investigating precognitive dream reports using rigorous protocol instead of just outright rejecting it because of all of these connections. So such research does lead scientists to consider this new physics, an expanded understanding of quantum mechanics that might be essential for explaining how information transfers in unconventional channels. Conscious entanglement is a powerful abstraction that guides our exploration. Because what if prophetic is essentially an emergent property of an entangled quantum-aware mind? Dreams have been a source of prophecy and inspiration in cultures worldwide, from biblical Joseph's night visions to scientific breakthroughs that occurred in sleep. So now let's dive into two theories that, while distinct, both offer frameworks for how dreams, or consciousness in general, can tap into deeper reality. Fredrico Fagin's ideas and the Penrose-Hammeroff or theory. I'll tie these together in the concept of dreams as a medium of quantum resonance, essentially the mind vibrating in tune with the quantum information field. So you might not know his name, but if you listen to my channel enough, you definitely do. Fredrico Fagin is the physicist who invented the microprocessor, and you will definitely hear me talk a lot about him on this channel. In recent years, Fagin has turned his formidable intellect to the nature of consciousness. He proposes what he calls quantum information panpsychism, or QIP, which is way easier to say. The gist is revolutionary. He argues that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality, existing even at the quantum field level, establishing its source of independent emergence from brain complexity. Fagin proposes that quantum fields are conscious, existing in a basic state of awareness while also possessing a proto-free will. Our physical bodies and brains, then, are like a quantum classical machine, operated by these conscious quantum fields. In other words, the source of our consciousness is not local. It resides in the fabric of the universe, and the brain is an interface that possesses and manifests it. So this theory implies that when we have a thought or a dream, we might actually be interfacing with a vast sea of quantum information that underlies everything. So, when we dream of something that later happens, perhaps it's not that we predicted it, but that our consciousness was momentarily in resonance with a state of the quantum field encoding that information. Fagin even suggests this theory could yield testable predictions, aiming to place it on solid scientific footing. But for our purposes, think of Quip as saying, the universe is like a cosmic mind, and each of our minds is a piece of tapping into the whole through quantum information exchange. Dreams, especially vivid or meaningful ones, could be moments when our individual mind harmonizes with that larger mind, a clear station tuning in on the radio dial of the cosmos. Okay, and now we gotta look at Sir Roger Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hammeroff, who was an anesthesiologist, which might sound weird, but his research and his profession has given him interesting insights into the way that the mind works. Together, they formulated the Orchestrated Objective Reduction, or ORIC, or theory of consciousness, which you'll hear me tell me a lot about as well, but with a lot of sighing, largely because of the anesthesiologist profession, is a lot of people tend to discount that, and also a lot of people tend to only focus on Penrose as a consciousness researcher, failing. I don't even have to dust it off that much. That's how often I get into this. Bible's cleaner, though. But anyway, they fail to realize that he's not just a consciousness researcher. He is a physicist. He is an actual renowned, super dope physicist, and I recommend everybody should study his work. And you can see all of my notes and stuff in it that I scribble as well, because I have the back of the book. Anyway. They're legit, okay? Their theory posits that consciousness arises from quantum computations happening inside neurons, specifically within tiny structures called microtubules. Microtubules are skeletal filaments in cells, and in neurons, they help maintain structure and perhaps play roles in signaling. ORIC suggests that these microtubules can maintain quantum coherent states. Basically, subatomic particles in superposition for short periods, despite the brain's warm, wet environment, which was once thought impossible for quantum effects. But thankfully, we're in 2025 and we're learning new things and that this is possible. These quantum states are orchestrated by synaptic inputs and influenced by memory or pattern information stored in microtubule arrangements, and then they undergo Penrose's proposed objective reduction, which is a collapse of the quantum state that Penrose ties to space-time geometry. When such a collapse happens, it's not random, but influenced by mutable factors related to the structure of the universe itself, according to Penrose. The result is a moment of conscious awareness, or qualia, a unit of subjective experience. This cycle is happening billions of times that give us our stream of consciousness. And what makes this relevant to our theory is that in ORIC, the brain is directly connected to the fundamental reality at the quantum level. Penrose and Hammeroff explicitly say their theory accommodates both views. The consciousness evolved with biology, and it has been here all along, by suggesting that quantum vibrations in microtubules connect brain processes to self-organizing processes in the fine-scale proto-consciousness quantum structure of reality. And note the ending there. It's a proto-consciousness quantum structure of reality. It implies the fabric of the universe has the ingredients of consciousness, proto-consciousness, and our brains can link to it via these quantum processes. So how does this tie into prophetic dreams? If OR is correct, then when we dream, especially in certain phases of sleep, our microtubules might be engaging in quantum coherence with less interference from sensory inputs. Hammeroff has speculated that anesthesia, which shuts down consciousness, works by disrupting quantum processes in microtubules, and by contrast, dreaming might be a state where certain quantum vibrations are enhanced. Hammeroff even suggests that EEG rhythms, or brainwaves, might derive from deeper microtubule vibrations. In a dream, our brain isn't trying to navigate the external world, so these microtubule quantum states explore possibilities more freely, and maybe even entangle with other quantum systems beyond the body. This could manifest as dreams with information about things the person has no way of knowing via normal senses. Essentially, prophetic dreaming is our brain's microtubules registering at quantum level information about future or past events in, again, small ways that our brain is able to interpret in a particular way. It's like having a teeny tiny picture on a film, and then when you put the film under a magnifying glass, you get a picture. But because it's so teeny tiny, there's distortions, you might not get all of it, maybe it's old or damaged, it's not complete information, so it comes across, again, as symbols or broken information or things that you would understand. So, for example, Paul in Revelation, he sees metal clanging insects in his vision. We today might interpret that as helicopters. It's like our internal radio picks up a faint station when noisy daytime stations, our sensory inputs, are turned off at night. Under auric OR, each conscious moment is the collapse of a quantum state influenced by the universe's fundamental patterns. So if you line up a series of movements, as in a dream narrative, it's conceivable that some of those movements incorporate patterns corresponding to future outcomes. Again, like you might be able to get a picture from broken information, or might interpret a picture from broken information based off of how you understand those symbols. Both Fagin and Penrose-Hammeroff's theories give us scenarios in which consciousness isn't boxed into just our skulls or the present moment. Instead, consciousness has quantum reach, either because it's a feature of quantum fields everywhere, as Fagin posits, or because it leverages quantum processes in the brain that connect to fundamental reality, as Penrose and Hammeroff suggest. Dreams, as an altered state of consciousness, may serve as a prime time for quantum resonance, that process where the mind oscillates in synchrony with those deeper levels. So when someone experiences a calling or a prophetic dream, those theories would suggest that it's natural and rare alignment of brain, mind, and cosmos. It's as if the signal strength from the quantum field spikes enough to break through to explicit awareness in the form of dream imagery or sudden insight. So a reoccurring theme in our discussion is that consciousness might not be confined to the brain. That challenges a big assumption in neuroscience, that your memories, your sense of self, all of it is stored in neurons and synapses. The traditional view is that memory is encoded in specific networks of brain cells. Anecdotal phenomena and certain advanced theories propose memory and mind may be non-local, with information distributed in a field-like way that extends beyond physical confines of the brain. Consider some puzzles. People with severe brain damage that sometimes retain memories that in theory should have been erased. Savants that can perform astounding mental feats that seem to access information beyond their brain's storage capacity. And during near-death experiences, some report a clearer perception at a time when their brain was clinically inactive. These hence drive us to think outside that brain cavity box. One very interesting framework is the holomnemonic brain theory, developed by neurosurgeon Carl Pribram and physicist David Bohm. They propose that the brain might function like a hologram, where information is spread out over interface patterns rather than localized in specific cells. In a hologram, every piece contains the whole image, and if you shine it under the right light. Analogously, in the brain, memory could be distributed across networks in wave patterns. Retrieving a memory would be like reconstructing an image from a diffracted pattern. This model inherently features non-local storage. Each part of the dendritic network contains all of the information stored over the entire network. The summary of holonomic theory explains. In fact, one of the most important aspects of Pribben's model is that non-locality of memory storage. A specific memory is not stored in a specific location. The memory is smeared across the brain's field of activity, much like a holographic plate, similarly to quantum systems, where information about a whole system can be encoded between the relationships or interference patterns between the parts. Now, if the brain uses field-like processes internally, it's only a small step to consider that it might interface with external fields too. The idea of a wider field of consciousness posits that a memory could exist, a global field, some call it the Akashic field, as we have mentioned, or names like collective unconsciousness in Jungian terms. And the brain retrieves information from this field rather than storing every single detail locally. British biologist Rupert Sheldrake has famously suggested morphic fields that carry the memory of habits of nature which individually brains tap into. Though his ideas are outside mainstream acceptance, they resonate with this theme of a non-local memory. Another angle comes from the quantum brain dynamics, where researchers like Harumi Umezawa, who consider the possibility of quantum fields in the brain that encode memory in a distributed way, entangled with a vacuum field fluctuations. Memory transcends simple neural encoding within synapses. It resembles a process of tuning a frequency to access information in a wider field. And just as radio doesn't contain actual songs, but plays them when tuned to the right channel, your brain might play memories by tuning into a personal or universal memory field. Challenging the assumption of a brain-only memory also opens the question of where consciousness resides. If you've been following our journey, you'll notice a pattern. Consciousness might reside everywhere, in a sense, in fundamental fields, relational patterns, etc., and the brain is a localization device. A transmissive filter model, as we discussed earlier, explicitly says the brain filters a wider consciousness. When this filter loosens, a phenomenon occurring in dreams, trance, or near-death situations, one can experience a consciousness that extends past the individual ego. So you might type into something broader, call it collective memory, universal mind, spiritual insight, talking to God. It's all the same thing, is your 3D shadow self has dropped and a beam from the 4D has opened up. And so this could explain why altered states, why some produce knowledge or creative ideas, that as though they came through the person rather than from them. It's as if the person's mind was a radio picking up on a broadcast from a non-local source. In episodes of inspiration, the memory of something you've never learned might just pop in, and some inventions and musical compositions have been reported to emerge whole in dreams, for example. So to put it succinctly, here we're questioning whether the brain is the storage of consciousness or just the receiver and transmitter. And increasingly, models are emerging that favor the latter. A recent scholarly paper even argues for a synthesis of the productive, brain-made mind, and transmissive, brain-channeled mind models, noting that the brain is extraordinarily receptive to external signals and fields. The authors highlight evidence that the brain responds to external electromagnetic stimuli and even emits photons, hinting at a communication medium beyond neurons. If memory can exist outside the brain in a field, then phenomena like telepathy or clairvoyance become at least conceptually possible. They would become instances of information being retrieved from a common field rather than sent via signals. For prophecy, this means that the information about future events out there in the field and a consciousness that is not strictly limited by time could access it. Whereas a brain from brain-only perspective, that's impossible. The future isn't stored in your synapses. From a field perspective, maybe the future does cast a shadow backward in information space. It ripples out in time. And some interpretations of quantum physics allow retrocausality, where future events influence the present at the microscopic level. All told, exploring consciousness outside the brain invites us to imagine prophecy as a real and rare phenomenon of field-based memory or knowing. A prophet might thus be someone who can attune to the memory of the future, so to speak, something encoded in the fabric of reality that most of us don't notice, but which an attuned consciousness can faintly perceive. It's a mind-bending idea, but it transforms a prophecy from a violation of physics to perhaps an advanced application of physics. Okay, if by now you are, wow, she's thoroughly crazy, I don't understand what she's talking about at all. A lot of these ideas are grounded in the foundations that we've laid in previous episodes, like the quantum dream episode, where we explored Maria von Franz's concept of inner stillness and psychological abstraction. And we expanded that into biophysics and inner sight, and cultivated by silence of the mind serves as a functional tuning of the antenna, and we discussed here in this episode. Moving from the psychological method to the biological mechanism connects von Franz's reflective symbolism directly to the piezoelectric resonance of pineal crystals. This creates a clear continuum where the brain's quantum processing acts as an interface with the broader cosmic field that we touched upon earlier. So let's bridge the gap between Jungian depth and psychology, and quantum resonance implies that this inner voice operates as a reception of the signal pervading the collective unconscious. Throughout this episode, we redefine the prophet as the master pattern of recognition, accessing a non-local information network. I propose that consciousness functions as a primary receiver, suggesting that the brain and body act like a complex radio turning into the Akashic record or zero-point field. This theory draws on support from our examination of specific psychological hardware, specifically the potential piezoelectric properties of the pineal gland in the second brain, intelligence of the vagus nerve. Framing the dreaming mind as a state of high-level quantum abstraction allows consciousness to become entangled with information transcending linear time, offering a physics-based explanation for precognitive dreams. The overarching theme here, though, is the series remains the harmonization of scientific inquiry and mystical experience. We find that ancient spiritual metaphors regarding our oneness and inner light map surprisingly well onto modern concepts of quantum entanglement, non-locality, and bioelectromagnetism. The narrative characterizes the human organism as an open interface comprised of interconnected nodes capable of resonating with a universal field. Viewing the body as a sensory instrument for the cosmos bridges the gap between tangible neurons and the intangible prophecy, revealing a highly interconnected reality. So bringing everything together, we can synthesize a compelling picture. Prophetic insights may be thought of as the interpretation of quantum signals from a deeper reality, accessible within our evolving biology. Ergo, a prophet or intuitive is someone who has learned, consciously or unconsciously, to detect and decode faint signals that most of us tune out. Those signals could be patterns in a universal information field, vibrational clues picked up by the body, or quantum resonances in the brain connecting to a proto-consciousness level of nature. The prophetic message, whether it's a vision of the future, a solution to a problem, or guidance for a community, is like the readout that the brain produces after processing those signals through the person's own psyche and symbolism. So this transforms our understanding of prophecy from a mystical anomaly to perhaps advanced form of insight that sits on the continuum with everyday intuition and creativity. And a final takeaway is a reminder that universal access is possible through awareness and sensitivity. If every mind is a receiver, then, as we've argued, everyone can work on their receiving capabilities, which I'll discuss in future episodes. These concepts enhance the understanding of consciousness and interconnectedness, as the discussion demonstrates the shrinking division between mystical and scientific, inner and outer or personal mind and objective world. Consciousness is deeply personal, experience says the I, while simultaneously transpersonal and universal, possibly originating from a field present everywhere. Since Penrose, Fagin, Laszlo, and other thinkers suggest consciousness is a fundamental part of the universe, interconnectedness constitutes a physical reality rather than a spiritual ideal. Prophets or intuitives capable of glimpsing the larger universal pattern comprehend more than their individual experience. Understanding this profoundly changes one worldview. It encourages reverence for the individual mind and suggests ethical considerations regarding the influence on collective consciousness. New avenues of research will appear, suggesting consciousness should be studied as something extended in space, rather than contained within brains. Ancient knowledge is validated by this, as many wisdom traditions claim that the answers reside within, stating that one must know oneself to know the universe. A scientific interpretation concludes that to know the universe, one must know consciousness, because consciousness and the universe are entwined. And of course, all of this begets the question, is one path doing more for humanity's evolution than others? I'll save that for another time too. And that wraps it up for today. As always, the sources are in the channel bio, but thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment like the winners that you are, and I will see you next time. Bye.